from the Palestinian or Muslim point of view, like, what is the conflict? Like, so when people say the IP conflict, what is the conflict?
So from my, growing up with it being very close to me, from my understanding is it first started around the 40s, and from what my dad and family have told me is basically an army showed up and they told people to leave, and some people did, some people didn't. And then there was another one later on in the 60s. That's the one that my family was a part of.
So it's mostly about just human rights violations. Like our homes have been constantly being taken away from us for years and years and years. My family is right now fighting the Israeli government in court, trying to get some of our land back. So I don't want to speak too much on it. Just, it's a lot more complicated than just land or just like religion. It's the way that the infrastructure in Israel has been set up. It's similar to how the infrastructure is here in North America, where it keeps a lot of the indigenous people out. There's like infrastructure being like railways, access to products or hospitals or water. When it comes back to that in Israel, a lot of it is set up so that Palestinians don't have access to certain areas, even within their own territories. It goes back to a lot of breaking UN laws, like a lot of the things that Israel have done and encroaching on the Palestinian territories. It's illegal. Like the borders were set and they weren't followed.
It sounds like there's systemic things there's systemic institutional things that have been created purposely to exclude Palestinians. Why?
That's a very good question. Looking through history, it almost looks a lot like, I mentioned this to you earlier in the private message, Deanna, about Rwanda, like how it reminds me a lot of that, like how the Belgians came in and convinced these two ethnic groups that one was better. And I know it's very different, but they basically kind of just pit them against each other and kind of sat to reap the benefits. And I feel like with all the different groups in the Jewish community, there's a certain group that is taking a narrative and running with it. I don't want to get too controversial, but I really feel like white supremacy plays into this whole thing very much so. Like there's blatant ethnic cleansing. 40% of Palestine, according to that Bernie Sanders post, is children. Like they're under the age of 15, which means a lot. And also, according to my dad, he told me Jordan is 90% Palestinian. Like all the refugees live in Jordan.
Yeah, the vast majority of Israelis, I believe, are of European descent, and then the Sephardic and the Mizrahi, I guess would be the word, the Middle Eastern Jewish population. They are a minority and they experience a lot of struggles as well. Just today, there was a Middle Eastern Jewish guy that was confused to be an Arab. Jewish settlers drug him out of his car and beat him half to death because they thought he was an Arab.
The way that the media portrayed that was that it was not a mob of Israeli settlers that did it, but that it was like Palestinian Arabs that did it, that dragged the Jewish man from the car, even though it wasn't. He was just mistaken for an Arab person.